The building stood tall and gleaming under the early morning haze. Crowley Enterprises, a symbol of power and prestige, was still asleep, at least to those at the top. But for Sierra Lane, this was when her day began. Long before the executives arrived in their polished shoes and expensive suits, she was already there, blending into the silence. Her sneakers squeaked gently on the marble floors as she pushed her cleaning cart through the vast hallway. The janitor's uniform she wore was 2 sizes too big, its navy blue fabric faded from too many washes. Her hair was tied into a low practical bun. Her hands bore the marks of long hours, dry skin, calluses, strength hidden beneath humility. She paused near the elevator, mopping a section of the floor with slow, even strokes. The corporate world buzzed behind these walls, yet no one ever asked for her name. No one questioned how she knew the floor plans better than most employees. No one noticed the glances she gave to spreadsheets left open on glowing monitors, or the way she studied the quarterly performance charts posted on bulletin boards, because Sierra Lane was invisible. At 6:42 a.m., the elevator dinged. Out stepped Vincent Crowley, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, coffee in hand, Bluetooth earpiece buzzing with morning market updates. Vincent barely glanced in Sierra's direction. He hated arriving before the sun, but today was important. A new investor was set to review the company's numbers, and rumors of restructuring had him on edge. He walked briskly past her, and in the same breath said, "You missed a spot by the conference room. Floors look dull." He didn't slow down, didn't wait for a response. To him, she was just a uniform, a task, a blur. Sierra didn't flinch. She finished her mopping, then pushed the cart forward. But for the briefest moment, her eyes followed him. Cold, unreadable, sharp as glass. She had watched this man for months. How he spoke to his staff like tools. How he signed contracts without reading them. How he laughed too loudly in rooms filled with people too afraid to stop him. Vincent Crowley, the self-made CEO, heir to a ruthless legacy. He wouldn't remember the girl in the hallway, but she remembered everything. As she entered the supply closet to refill her bucket, she passed by the company's mission statement etched into the wall. Excellence through efficiency, power through vision. She let out a quiet breath. One more day, she told herself. Just one more day in this uniform. And then everything would change. The stainless steel doors slid open with a mechanical hum, revealing the sterile, mirrored interior of the executive elevator. Sierra stepped inside first, her cleaning cart parked just outside. She pressed the button for the 21st floor and stood quietly in the corner, her hands folded in front of her. The doors were just about to close when a sleek black shoe wedged itself between them. With a subtle chime, they parted again, and in walked Vincent Crowley. He barely looked up from his phone, thumbs flying across the screen in a blur of text messages, stock updates, and ignored calls. His presence filled the space instantly. His cologne, his tailored suit, his ego. He hit the button for the top floor, clearly ignoring the one already glowing. It was just the two of them. Sierra could hear the faint bass of his music leaking through one wireless earbud. For a moment, he didn't even acknowledge her. Silence hung heavy in the cramped space, just the distant whoosh of the elevator, climbing floor by floor. Then, without looking up, he muttered, "You missed a spot on 12. The words came out sharp, dismissive, more like static than speech, as if she were merely a fault in his machine, a glitch. Sierra didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. The muscles in her jaw tightened just slightly. Then she gave the barest of nods, the kind that said "noted" without offering an ounce of submission. She kept her eyes forward, trained on the steel panel beside the doors. But inside her, something shifted. Not with rage, not with pride, with resolve. She had spent over a year watching him in moments like this, when he was unaware he was being watched. Arrogance wasn't just in his voice. It was in the way he assumed no one below his status mattered. His words were always aimed downward, never sideways, never up. It was always a monologue to the people he thought couldn't answer back. Floor 17. The elevator slowed. Vincent sighed loudly, annoyed by a message that had just popped up on his phone. Useless, he mumbled to himself, referring to one of his junior analysts. Then his eyes flicked to the reflection in the mirrored wall, finally meeting Sierra's. And something strange happened. For a split second, he paused. Not in recognition, but confusion. Her expression wasn't blank. It wasn't afraid. It wasn't the tired resignation he expected from someone in that uniform. Her eyes met his, steady, focused, utterly unreadable. And then the doors opened. Vincent stepped out without another word. His phone rang. "Yeah, I'm on my way," he barked into the receiver, walking down the corridor without ever turning back. Sierra remained in the elevator. The doors began to close again, but as they did, her lips curled into the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. There were only a few hours left until the board meeting, and the next time they shared a room, he wouldn't be standing above her. He would be looking up. The whispers started on a Tuesday, subtle at first, just a few hushed voices by the coffee machine, a nervous laugh by the printer, a few glances exchanged between interns and assistants who knew better than to speak too loudly. "Did you hear? Someone bought up a massive stake. They won't say who. Crowley might not be in charge for long." By noon, it was all anyone was pretending not to talk about. A quiet wave of tension rippled through the corridors of Crowley Enterprises. Even in the executive suites, voices lowered. Meetings became more frequent. Vincent's door slammed shut more often than usual. The cause of it all? A silent takeover. Someone, anonymous, faceless, had acquired a controlling percentage of shares in the company. Not over weeks, not even over months. It had happened nearly overnight. One by one, small shareholders had been approached. Generous offers made. Contracts signed in private. No public disclosures. No headlines. The name on the acquisition papers? Redacted. The board was furious. Legal scrambled. Vincent's jaw was locked with tension, trying to maintain control in a room where the air was growing thinner by the hour. Meanwhile, across the city, in a quiet downtown office with no windows and no signs on the door, Sierra Lane sat at a glass table, staring at the final page of the final document. The pen in her hand didn't shake. The lawyer across from her smiled nervously. "With this signature, you now hold 52.3% of Crowley Enterprises. You'll be listed officially as the majority shareholder tomorrow. Are you sure you want this kept private?" Sierra didn't look up from the paper. "I want my name sealed until I walk into that boardroom," she said calmly. "Not a second earlier." The lawyer hesitated. "Understood." She signed. One smooth stroke, then another. The ink dried slowly on the page, but her plan had been solidifying for years. This moment wasn't luck. It was built. Quietly, ruthlessly, strategically. While Vincent Crowley was making headlines, Sierra was making moves. While the company celebrated record quarters, she was buying. While others watched stocks fluctuate, she bought when no one was looking. Every paycheck she earned, scrubbed into tile and wrung out of calloused hands, was invested with precision. And with every share, she took back what had been stolen. Because Crowley Enterprises wasn't just a building, it was a wound, a promise, a legacy. And it was hers now. She folded the documents neatly and slid them back across the table. "Send everything to the board. Just don't include the name." The lawyer nodded, stunned. "They'll never see it coming." Sierra stood, straightened the simple black blazer she wore. No flashy jewelry, no designer heels, just purpose and timing. "Good," she said. "That's the point." As she left the office and stepped into the light rain, her reflection passed across a storefront window. She looked ordinary, unremarkable, perfect. Let them keep guessing. Let the rumors grow. Because tomorrow she wouldn't just walk into that boardroom. She would own it. The janitor's closet was always quiet. Tucked behind a steel door on the 9th floor, it was a forgotten space. Too narrow for two people to stand side by side. Too dusty to feel like part of a company worth billions. Fluorescent light flickered overhead, and the scent of bleach clung to the air like a memory that wouldn't leave. Sierra stood alone facing the back wall. The wooden shelf above her head was sagging with old mop heads, cardboard boxes, and a rusted-out bucket that hadn't been used in years. It was the same closet she'd used for months. But today she wasn't cleaning. Her eyes scanned the wall in front of her, settling on a panel that never quite sat flush. She'd noticed it on her first week, a small, uneven gap in the wood. Something had always pulled at her about it, some invisible thread. She reached for the screwdriver in her cart, knelt down and pried it open with a single twist. Behind the panel was dust, a few cobwebs, and a folded envelope. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free, a whisper of age in the crinkle of the paper. Faded blue ink spelled out her name, Sierra, in delicate, looping handwriting she hadn't seen in over a decade. Her heart clenched. It was her mother's. She sank to the floor slowly, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand. The cold concrete pressed against her knees as she unfolded the letter. My sweet Sierra, if you are reading this, then maybe the world has changed. Maybe you found your way back to this place. I gave everything I had to this building. Years of quiet work, of dignity swallowed, of being looked through. But one day Vincent Crowley Sr. called me into his office, accused me of stealing a necklace from his wife. I never even saw it. They didn't ask. They didn't listen. They just fired me. No investigation. No second chance. Just shame. I left this here because I had a feeling you'd come back someday. You were always so determined, so smart, so full of questions. They humiliated me in this building. But one day, I believe, you'll walk in proud. Mom. The paper trembled in her hands, tears slipping down her cheeks in silence. She hadn't known the full story. Her mother had never spoken of that day in detail, just a bitter sadness, a job lost, a life unraveled. It had sent their family spiraling into years of struggle, eviction, food stamps, school delays. Sierra had learned to clean floors at 8 years old because her mother had to take on 3 jobs at once. And it had all started here, Crowley Enterprises, the same company that now unknowingly belonged to her. Sierra folded the letter with reverence, placing it gently in the inside pocket of her jacket, close to her heart. She stood up slowly and looked around the closet once more. This time not as a cleaner, not even as a daughter, but as a woman returning to rewrite the end of a stolen story. She replaced the panel and walked out, leaving the mop and bucket behind. She wouldn't need them anymore. She had carried her mother's burden for long enough. Tomorrow she would carry her mother's justice. The uniform felt heavier that day, not because it was physically different. Same navy blue fabric, same faded name tag clipped to the pocket, same rubber soles, but because Sierra knew it would be the last time she ever wore it. She arrived earlier than usual, before even the skeleton staff shuffled in. The halls of Crowley Enterprises were still, bathed in blue pre-dawn light, filtering through glass panels. The silence wasn't unfamiliar. It had been her companion for years. But this time, she wasn't just cleaning. She was studying. With each pass of her mop, she moved through the building like a ghost. Unseen, unnoticed, yet absorbing everything. Every whispered conversation between junior managers, every passive-aggressive comment from the head of finance, every eye roll and fake smile, she cataloged the small corruptions of everyday power. The assistant crying quietly in the break room, the temp workers denied proper overtime, the sneers from middle management when the receptionist dared ask a question. She didn't need notebooks. She had memory. By 9 a.m., the building came alive with footsteps and egos. Vincent Crowley swept into the main lobby, laughing into his phone, oblivious to the fact that the woman wiping the glass behind him already owned everything he touched. She saw him flirt with a junior exec, make a crude joke in the hallway, bark orders at someone who dared walk too slow. She didn't flinch. She just watched, quietly, carefully. Every person in that building moved under the illusion of hierarchy, titles pinned to egos like medals on soldiers. But none of them knew the ranks had already shifted, that the crown had already changed hands. And Sierra wasn't just cleaning the floors. She was observing the kingdom she was about to inherit. At one point, she passed the boardroom. It was being prepped for the quarterly meeting scheduled for the next day. The long table gleamed, nameplates were laid out, bottled waters arranged in neat rows. The seat at the head of the table was reserved for Vincent. She looked at it for a long moment, then turned away. Not yet. Her final round of cleaning brought her to the executive restrooms, polished, pristine, and quiet. As she scrubbed the sink for show, she caught her own reflection in the mirror. Her uniform, her hair pulled back, her eyes. She looked tired, but underneath the fatigue was something sharper. Purpose, forged from every overlooked hour, every ignored idea. Every night she spent studying financial strategy in a shared apartment where the heating barely worked. She didn't hate this version of herself. She respected it because it was this version, this invisible woman, who had made the impossible happen. She dried her hands, left the restroom, and rolled the cart into the supply closet for the last time. She placed the mop carefully against the wall, like an old weapon she no longer needed. Then she unpinned her name tag and tucked it in her pocket. It wasn't shame she felt. It was gratitude, because invisibility had been her greatest disguise. And tomorrow they'd all finally see her. The boardroom on the 22nd floor was a cathedral of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows that swallowed the skyline, a gleaming mahogany table that could seat 20, and a silence so heavy it swallowed even the ticking of the wall clock. At 8:57 a.m., the executives began to arrive. One by one, men and women in suits took their seats, greeting each other with rehearsed smiles and controlled handshakes. Coffee cups steamed. Tablets glowed with slide decks and quarterly figures. A sense of routine settled in, the predictable rhythm of another quarterly performance review. At 9:02, the glass doors swung open with a hiss. Vincent Crowley strode in like he owned the oxygen in the room. He wore confidence like armor. A tailored navy suit, pocket square folded with surgical precision, watch glinting beneath the cuff. His assistant trailed behind him with a tablet in hand, rattling off numbers he wasn't listening to. He didn't need to. This was his show, his company, his room. His eyes scanned the table, board members, department heads, legal advisors, and then paused. At the far end of the table, opposite his seat, sat a woman he didn't recognize. She was poised, calm, dressed in a sharp black blazer, hair down in soft waves, eyes steady and composed. No badge, no assistant, no nameplate, just a leather folder in front of her and an expression that did not blink. Vincent's brow furrowed. "Who let her in?" he asked loudly, not even addressing her directly. "This room is for board-level personnel only." Murmurs stirred. No one answered. He turned toward her with the impatience of someone used to obedience. "You're in the wrong room. This meeting is confidential." The woman didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head slightly, opened the leather folder, and slid a document across the table toward him. Her voice was clear and even. "I believe you'll want to read this." The paper stopped in front of him, its top edge perfectly aligned with his coffee cup. Vincent didn't reach for it immediately. He stared at her, waiting for some sign of apology, fear, confusion. He got none. Finally, he picked it up and read the first line. "Ownership Transfer Certificate. Crowley Enterprises, 52.3% majority stakeholder, Sierra Lane." His throat tightened. He read it again, then again. Around the table, chairs creaked, heads tilted, eyes widened. Someone dropped a pen. Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper, sharp and disbelieving. "This has to be a joke." The woman stood up slowly. "No joke," she said. "My name is Sierra Lane. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the majority owner of Crowley Enterprises." Silence. Vincent looked at the lawyer seated 2 chairs down. "Is this real?" The man nodded, pale. "Verified. The shares were acquired legally, signed, sealed, and filed." Sierra walked slowly toward the head of the table. Her heels echoed with deliberate weight. Vincent didn't move. He simply stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "I thought you were—" he started, but the words choked. She stopped beside him. Her voice was soft, measured. "You thought I was the cleaning lady." She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Turns out, I was cleaning up more than just the floors." She sat down at the head of the table, confident, grounded, seen. Vincent remained frozen, holding the paper like it had burned him. The meeting had just begun, but the company would never be the same again. Silence clung to the boardroom like fog, thick, unmoving, and suffocating. The usual air of corporate control had evaporated, leaving behind the stunned stillness of a room that no longer knew its hierarchy. Eyes darted from the ownership document in Vincent's hand to the woman now seated confidently at the head of the table. Sierra Lane. It wasn't just the name. It was the way she sat, spine straight, chin lifted, presence undeniable. She didn't need to raise her voice. The silence worked for her now. "My name," she began, her voice calm but firm, "is Sierra Lane, and as of 9 a.m. this morning, I own 52% of Crowley Enterprises." She let the words hang. No theatrics, no gloating, just truth. But the impact was seismic. A few chairs shifted. Someone coughed awkwardly. A junior board member whispered, 52%, like it was a foreign language. Vincent Crowley, still holding the paper, looked as if all the blood had drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. He blinked twice, then finally managed, "I thought you were the clean—" Sierra raised her hand, cutting him off before he could finish the sentence. "You thought wrong." The interruption landed with a snap. She didn't say it cruelly. She didn't have to. Her voice was even, composed. The voice of someone who had waited long enough to be heard and now refused to be interrupted. Vincent's lips tightened. He looked down at the document again, as if it might rearrange itself into something more acceptable. But the numbers didn't lie. Neither did the signatures. Her name sat at the top, bold and legal and permanent. "I don't understand," he muttered, shaken. "This... how?" Sierra turned slightly in her chair, addressing the boardroom, not just Vincent. "Over the last 18 months, I acquired shares through silent purchases, private contracts, strategic acquisitions. I bought out minor stakeholders, former employees, even vendors with small equity stakes. I saw the opportunity, and I took it." Her fingers tapped once on the table. "And nobody noticed," or she added, "because I wasn't supposed to matter." A few of the board members exchanged uneasy glances. One or two seemed almost impressed, not by her words, but by the audacity of it, the precision, the silence with which she had turned the entire foundation of the company upside down. Vincent sat down slowly, still holding the paper. He stared at her like he was trying to recognize a face he'd seen 1,000 times but never really looked at. Sierra met his gaze without flinching. "You passed me in the halls," she said. "You criticized the shine of the floors. You never asked my name, never thought to look twice." His voice cracked slightly. "You were always watching me?" "No," she replied, leaning in slightly. "I was watching the company, watching what it became, and preparing to take it back." The silence returned, but this time, it bowed to her. Sierra Lane, once invisible, now sat in full view. Not as an assistant, not as a cleaner, not even as a challenger, but as the one holding the crown. Vincent Crowley sat in stunned silence, still trying to process the impossible. But while he was frozen in the now, Sierra's mind briefly drifted back to the long, dark years that brought her here. Flashbacks flickered like scenes from a film only she had watched. She was 19 the first time she pushed a mop through the halls of Crowley Enterprises. It wasn't even for them. She was a subcontractor for a third-party cleaning service, paid minimum wage under the table. Night shifts, no benefits, no breaks. During the day, she sat in a rundown community college classroom, surviving on vending machine coffee and hope. She studied economics with a textbook borrowed from the library and covered in highlighted notes from someone she'd never met. She couldn't afford a laptop, so she handwrote every assignment. Her professors often said, "You're quiet, but you listen like someone with a plan." They were right. By her second year, she knew more about market cycles than half the junior analysts at Crowley. While executives toasted IPO gains upstairs, Sierra quietly watched the company's stock from a prepaid cell phone. When its value dipped after a scandal, Vincent buried with NDAs and PR spin, she bought a tiny fraction, $130 worth, her first share. No one noticed. Over the next 3 years, she worked and studied and bought. She took a second job on weekends, running deliveries for a local grocery store. Every tip, every spare dollar she didn't need for rent or food went into her portfolio. She learned the names of every small shareholder, retirees, burned-out former employees, third cousins of early investors. She sent polite emails, had quiet conversations, made generous offers with loan money she earned by pitching her business thesis to a credit union willing to take a risk on a girl who spoke numbers like poetry. And still, no one looked closely enough to question. Why would they? To them, she was still the same girl wiping down elevator buttons and blending into the background. But beneath that invisibility, Sierra had built a strategy sharp enough to dismantle an empire. In a flashback, we see her on the bus at 2 a.m., eyes closed but lips silently mouthing stock prices. We see her in the back of a lecture hall, taking notes on corporate governance while still in her janitor uniform, hidden under an oversized hoodie. We see her at an investor mixer, serving drinks and listening. She never asked to be let in. She built a door and stepped through it herself. Back in the boardroom, Vincent still couldn't look her in the eye. He didn't know about the nights she studied while her mother coughed herself to sleep in the next room. He didn't know about the internship she was offered and rejected because she was too tired of being patronized. He didn't know she'd sat silently in boardrooms like this one years ago, cleaning spilled coffee from the floor while dreaming of standing at the head of the table. But he would know now, because the quiet girl with the mop had outplayed them all. The silence didn't last long. Once the shock settled into the bones of the boardroom, the questions began. Some were whispered, others were barked, but all of them circled the same core disbelief, that the invisible woman at the head of the table now held the power they once thought untouchable. Sierra didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She reached into the leather folder again and calmly slid a stack of documents across the table toward the company's legal counsel. Effective immediately, she said, the following board members are terminated from their positions due to ethical violations, breach of fiduciary duty, and hostile workplace conduct. She named 3 men and 1 woman, all powerful, all previously untouchable. Gasps rose like a wave. One of them opened his mouth to object, but Sierra cut him off with a look that could shatter glass. There's no negotiation, she added. The paperwork is final. Your exit packages have already been wired. Security will escort you out before noon. One of the men turned to Vincent for help, but Vincent said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the table in front of him, like he was trying to wake from a dream that had turned into a nightmare. Sierra continued, flipping to the next page. All current contracts with subcontracted custodial, food service, and administrative staff will be reviewed and renegotiated under a fair wage initiative. No employee, not one, will be paid below a livable standard, while executive bonuses remain bloated. A murmur of discomfort rolled through the remaining members. She didn't flinch. The company has operated for years on the backs of people it refused to see, she said. That ends today. Then came the final point, the one no one expected. All internal reporting of harassment and discrimination claims will be reopened. With independent oversight, every voice that was ignored will be reheard. At that, one woman near the far end of the table, a junior executive, always spoken over, always dismissed, sat up a little straighter. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. Vincent finally found his voice. You can't just come in here and dismantle everything, he snapped, leaning forward. Do you have any idea how long it took to build this? Sierra turned to him slowly. Her expression was unreadable, not angry, not smug, just finished. She looked at him like a surgeon looks at a tumor before the first cut, precise, detached, necessary. You built it on arrogance, she said, on fear, on silencing people who didn't have power. She stood from her chair, not to shout, but to make sure no one looked away. I built it in silence. I bought it in silence. I endured what no one in this room could have survived. And I did it with grace you never once offered to anyone else. Vincent tried again. This is betrayal. Sierra tilted her head slightly, eyes calm. No, she said. This is correction. The room fell still again. But this time, it wasn't stunned silence. It was the silence that follows a storm, the kind that makes you realize nothing will ever go back to how it was. And Sierra Lane, the former cleaning lady, the invisible student, the forgotten girl, had just issued her first order as the rightful ruler of the empire. The next morning, the lobby was more crowded than usual. Employees whispered behind steaming coffee cups. Security guards stood at attention. Even reporters had begun to gather near the revolving doors, tipped off by an anonymous source about a major change at the top. The familiar glass doors still bore the name every employee had walked under for years: Crowley Enterprises, etched in sleek silver, tall and proud, like the legacy it represented. But something was different today. The lights above the entrance flicked off. Two maintenance workers appeared, rolling in a scaffold and a velvet-covered plaque. Vincent Crowley stood at a distance near the edge of the room, jaw clenched, arms crossed. He wasn't escorted out. Sierra had allowed him to remain as an advisor if he chose. She wasn't interested in petty revenge, but he was no longer in charge. Now he was simply watching. The cover dropped. Gasps echoed across the lobby. The name Crowley Enterprises was gone. In its place, the letters gleamed in a warmer metal, more grounded than the cold chrome that came before. Lane Industries beneath it, a plaque. Simple, clean, quietly revolutionary. Not every mop cleans floors. Some mop the floor with history and write a new future. People stood in stunned silence, processing what they were seeing. For some, the name change was just that, a rebrand. For others, especially the ones in custodial uniforms or clerical name tags, it was something far more powerful. It was acknowledgement. It was vindication. And then she appeared. Sierra Lane stepped into the lobby, flanked not by bodyguards or executives, but by a few of the very workers who once shared silent break rooms with her. The building didn't just see her now. It moved out of her way. She walked past the plaque with her head high, eyes forward, heels echoing off the marble floor she once scrubbed. Every step was steady, measured, free, and the crowd parted. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. Reporters tried to rush toward her. One of them called out, "Miss Lane, do you have a comment about the takeover?" She paused only for a moment, then turned slightly, offering a faint smile. "I didn't take anything," she said. "I reclaimed it." And with that, she entered the elevator. The very same one where she once stood invisible beside the man who thought she was no one. The doors slid shut behind her. Upstairs, a new era was waiting. Sierra Lane didn't just inherit power, she reshaped its definition and left it carved in metal for the world to remember.